So in this session, let's see a new keyword which we didn't see till now in Java, called the final keyword. So please mute your audio. The final keyword. So as you know, all the keywords will be in lowercase letters. Even the final is also in lowercase letters. So what is the purpose of this final keyword means it has two purposes mainly. One is you can use this final keyword along with a instance variable of a class. So the first purpose of this final keyword is we can use this final keyword while creating an instance variable of a class. We'll normally create a variable uh, by mentioning its data type, right? Instance variable for a class like int, float, double, string, like this. So in the same way, you can create any variable, whether it is an integer variable, float, or double, or char, string, whatever it is. But you can qualify that variable with final keyword also. So when you use this final keyword along with the declaration of the instance variable in a class, what will happen to this variable is during declaration itself, if you assign some value to that variable, then automatically the value that you are giving to that variable will be the final value. So that means after that, later in your program, you cannot change the value of that variable. So normally, what is a variable? A variable is nothing but a value which keeps on changing. So you declare a variable normally int a, int b, like this. So in the during the course of execution of your program, the value of the variable may not be same. It may be changing. Say for example, you are using a loop control variable I, say in for loop. So initially I value will be 0. Say for example, you are starting the loop with I value as 0. Then in the next iteration, the I value may change to 1, 2, so on, like that. So that means the value of a variable keeps on changing. If the value does not change, we call it as a constant in programming, right? Variable and constant. Variable means the name itself indicates that that which changes or varies. That is why we call it as a variable. Constant means it will remain same. So you can create an instance variable in a class and make that variable a final hold a final value, which which cannot be changed later in some part of the program where you created that variable. So let me show you that with a small example program. So this is a final demo class which contains the main method. So look at how I'm creating the variable. Int a is equal to 10. I'm qualifying this variable int a with the keyword final. So you have to use the final keyword before the data type. You cannot use the final keyword after the data type, right? Then I'm displaying the value of a here. Then after that, I'm trying to make a change to the variable a is equal to 20. So I cannot change. Whatever value I have declared here, 10, the value of a, that will be the final value. You cannot change it to something else in later part of your program. That is, in the first line of this method, I created this variable a and assigned a value 10, right? So after that, if I'm trying to change this value to 20, this will not be accepted, right? So a value will have to remain 10 only. as long as the program executes. Okay, so let us run this program and see what will happen. It must generate an error here in this line. So you're getting an error in that lane, exactly in line number 7, where we are assigning 20 to a, cannot assign a value to a final variable, right? That is the error you're getting because you have declared it as final. So if I remove this final keyword here, then this will not generate any error. This will work final, right? So at the beginning it is 10 and then later it is modified to 20. This can happen with any variable normally, normal program. But when you make that variable as final like this, then this statement cannot be used. So I'll put this in comment, then it will display what? 2 times the same 10 value. A is 10, A is 10, because it is not modified. So you're printing the value of A 2 times in 2 different system.out.print statements. So you'll get 2 different, 2 times printing the same value 10, right? Now, what will happen to this variable if I don't assign a value to this instance variable A? I'll use the final keyword, right? But I'll not assign the value to this variable. Then let us see what will happen. Variable A might not have been initialized because we didn't initialize this A with some value. You're getting this error. So now I'll put this in comment. So it will print 20. The second system.out.println statement will print the value of A as 20. Now let us try to modify it again. Say this time I'm going to assign it as 30. So you'll get an error here again, right? So whether you assign a value to this variable during declaration itself or not, it doesn't matter. The first time you assign a value to that variable, that will be the first and the final value, first and the last value. So later you cannot change that value to something else. So even though I didn't assign a value here for A, I am assigning here, right? So that value will remain final value 20. So later I'm printing this value here, and if I try to assign a new value 30, it will generate an error for me, right? So for a final variable, you can only assign a value only one time. You cannot assign that value and modify it to something else later. Even if you try to use uh, scanner class also, let me show you with that also. So I'll give 50, then it will display 50. Later I'll modify this to 30. So you'll get an error here, right? Variable a might already have been assigned a is equal to 30. So you'll get an error when you try to assign a new value here. Even if you try to use the same scanner object to read a new value also, right? So you'll get the same error. So the first time you assign a value to that variable, a final variable, that will be the first and last value to that variable. Nowhere in the program you can modify to some other value. So this is what you need to understand from this final keyword usage with the instance variable or local variable of a class. Okay, then coming to the second usage of this final keyword is, so to prevent a class from being subclassed means what? You can restrict a class uh, from being subclass. That means from creating a subclass for an existing class. So you can use this final keyword along with the class name also, right? So you can create a class by qualifying it with the final keyword. Then if you qualify that class with the final keyword, what will happen is if you try to create a subclass for that class, it will not be allowed. So let me show with an example program that one also. So if you observe the program, the first class name is final. F is capital. Don't use small letter for class name always. That is a convention followed in Java because it may conflict with the keyword final. There is a keyword in Java called final, so we cannot use that keyword for any other purpose. You cannot use it as a name of a class, name of a variable, or name of a method, anything, right? Even you cannot use it as a name of an object also. So that's why don't give the small letters for class names. Always give a capital letter beginning with capital letter. So I'm giving a capital F final. uh, so instance variable a is defined with 10 value, and the display method is defined which will display that instance variable a's value. Now I define another class called f sub, right? So this program will work for me because final class is different and f sub is different. F sub is having an instance variable b20 whose value is 20, and display method which will display a and b values. But I cannot use this a value because a is not part of f sub, because it is not even a subclass for final. So I cannot use a here. So if I use simply b, that will work for me. So I'll only use b here instead of a. So it will print the value of b. And in finals class, I'm creating object for both the classes, uh, for final f and for f sub fs, and using their respective objects I'm calling the display method of each of both these classes, f dot display and fs dot display. So let us run this program and see. Right, so a is 10 and b is 20, they are displayed as usual. But now let me change this second class, that is f sub, and make it a, I'll make this as a subclass for the first class final. So now you will get a problem because the class final is uh, defined or qualified with this keyword final in front of it. We cannot create a subclass for this class called final, but we are doing it that here, right? You are creating a f sub class by extending final class. That means you are making f sub as a subclass for final, which is not a valid thing in Java because final class is defined as a final class. So now let me show you by comparing the program. So what is error in line number 9? Line number is 9 is nothing but the beginning of the class definition of f sub. So there you are getting a error. And what is error? What is that error? Cannot inherit from final. So this is a keyword and this is the class name, right? So what is that statement? Class f sub extends final. So this will generate an error because the second purpose of the final keyword is used to stop or prevent a class by being subclassed in your program. So that means it will prevent inheriting a class to another class, right? It will prevent a class which is defined as final to inherit its features to another class. So that is the purpose of final. So the meaning is that the class is the final. It will not be, it cannot be modified or added with some different features by creating a subclass for it. By creating a subclass, what you are doing, you are modifying it. That means you are adding the current features of the final class as well as a new feature you are trying to add to that final class by creating a subclass, right? So that means you are modifying it, so which is not permitted when you qualify that class as final keyword, right? So what is the purpose here is, if at all if you don't want to use inheritance or inherit the members of one class to another class in your Java program, then you can make that class as a final class. Automatically you'll not be allowed to create subclasses for that class. Any form of inheritance will not be accepted, hierarchical or multi-level uh, or single inheritance, whatever it is, or hybrid inheritance, whatever may be the case. In no way you'll be allowed to create subclass for it. So this is the second use of the final keyword. Okay, so understood?
Yes, sir, understood.
Okay, so today I'll stop with this final keyword. Mm, we have seen this keyword, we have seen super keyword, we have seen final keyword. This keyword, you know the purpose. It is not having any relationship with inheritance. But super keyword has a relationship with inheritance. Only when you use inheritance, super keyword can be used. And final keyword can be used with or without inheritance. In case if you are using it for a instance variable or local variable, it doesn't have any relationship with inheritance. But if you use this final keyword to a class, that class cannot be subclassed. Okay. So any doubt you can question now.
No, sir, nothing.
Right.
Uh,
You must get a doubt.
with final keyword?
Yeah, with the final keyword.
No, sir.
You must have a doubt.
Mm,
See, when we were using access specifiers, public, private, protected like this, right? Uh,
yeah,
we use those keywords with instance variables, with methods, and even with class also we can use,
yeah.
right? Then in the same way, can't we use this final keyword with a method?
Okay.
So this is the doubt you need to get,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So now, let me do one thing. I'll remove the final keyword for this class, but I'll use final keyword for this method display. Okay. So what will happen now is display method is defined in class final, and f sub is now made a subclass for final class. So this display method will also be member of f sub class now. But f sub is defining its own display method. So what is this? Overriding. So you are overriding the display method of final class in its subclass called f sub. So you are doing some overriding. Let me put this in comment. The first class object, superclass object, will only create subclass object, and because the display method, when you call the display method using this fs object, it will only call the subclass display method. It will not be able to call superclass display method. So how to call the superclass display method? You have to use super dot display like this, right? So let us see what will happen. So what is the error you are getting here? Display in fsub cannot override display in final, where fsub is subclass and final is superclass. So what is happening to display method? we are overriding the display method in superclass in the subclass fsub. So this will not be permitted because in superclass final you have defined this display method as a final keyword, right? So that's why overridden method is final. That is what you're getting an error. So now if I remove this final keyword for this method, so the error is gone. So the program works fine. So what do you understand from this? There is one more use for the final keyword. What is the third use? Any method qualified as final cannot be overridden. Okay, first one is any instance variable or local variable which is qualified as final cannot be modified later once you assign a value for the first time. Second purpose is if a class is qualified as a final keyword, then you cannot create a subclass for that class, right? So that means it will prevent inheritance for that class. Then coming to the third one is when you use this final keyword for a method to qualify a method as final, you will not allow that method to be overridden in its subclass. You cannot override that method. You can create any other method with a different name, but it will not allow you to create a same method. Okay, then let me make one more change. So now the program is working. So what we have done in this program is instead of overriding, we have overloaded. So in the superclass, you have the display method without any parameter, and in subclass, you have created a display method with a parameter. So if the method name is same, but the number of parameters or type of parameters are different in the same class, then what is that called as overloading. If the method names are same and even the parameter names are also same, number of parameters is also same and the type of parameters is also same, then we call it as overriding. So when you qualify a superclass method with final keyword, it cannot be overridden. We have seen that just before. But now what I am doing is instead of overriding, I am overloading by creating another method called display in the subclass, but with a one parameter. So that means the type signature is not same. The method name is same, but in the superclass version display has no parameters and subclass version has one parameter, right? So what will happen? You will be able to call the display method two times directly using the object. Once directly the subclass version without any parameter, that is superclass version without any parameter, and second time is subclass version with one parameter. The subclass version you have one parameter, right? So this is overloading. So overloading can be done when you qualify. When you qualify a superclass method with a final keyword, then you can overload it in the subclass. but when you qualify the same method with final keyword, you cannot override it in the subclass, right? So totally altogether you have three purposes for superclass. One is right. So these are the three purposes: prevent a variables from being modified, that is making them as constants; prevent a class from inheriting its members to another class, that is preventing inheritance; then third one is prevent a method from being overridden in the subclass. That means you qualify a method as final method, then in a class superclass, then in subclass you cannot override that method, right? So these are the three purposes of final keyword.